Hello, welcome back to my channel. Cheers if you are in the time of day for you where a drink of some sort is appropriate. I don't drink a lot, but I have honey whiskey. So I'm enjoying a little bit of honey whiskey tonight. And I'm doing I don't know if I'd call it a rant video, a Jamie talks randomly about books video kind of thing. Because I've been watching a lot of the State of the Booktube's videos. So what are those? State of the Booktube videos are like Booktube is dead, or Booktube is bad, or Booktube is broken, or Booktube is killing great literature, or all the stuff about how are we doing as Booktube, where do we stand in the world as Booktubers, should we be doing Booktube, like the state of the relationship conversations that may be good for a relationship but often are a sign that the relationship is dying. In the case of Booktube, I think this time of year is when a lot of people do a lot of navel gazing. We've had another year of statistics. Everybody's doing the end of the year stats for what your best books were, what your best videos were. Now you can watch an AI generated sort of summary of your year in YouTube, for example. Which may or may not reflect anything you actually do or think or care about, depending on how you use YouTube. If you haven't watched yours, they're amusing. Some things I would imagine AI found easy. Some things I'm not sure what it was thinking. I am on Booktube a lot. It's not that hard. Booktube, rug washing videos, and landscaping, like those free landscaping things where they go around and they pick a yard that needs help and they do it. I watch a lot of those. So, like, how hard could that be? Like, probably if you did those, and Booktube, especially live sprints and readathon videos. And then, probably audiobooks, because I do look for my LibriVox audiobooks for my classics on YouTube and listen to them that way. So that really is about it. That's what I watch. Yeah. And it had a weird arrangement of, I don't know. I'm not sure what it was thinking. Anyway, my summary was not those 4 types of videos. It was those and a bunch of other stuff I don't remember ever being into. At least not enough for any statistics to care about them. An aside. We'll see if I'm more or less loquacious with this influence. Yeah. So, one of the things that a lot of people have been emphasizing is this idea of self-education. I like this. I don't know how much of a trend it is. But I know when I was talking about it, it was in chat in reading sprints and not somewhere that I would have expected the algorithm to pick up on it. I don't know. Maybe it reads chats. It could. But now I'm seeing more videos about self-education and designing your own curriculum for self-education. That's a cool trend. Maybe I'm on trend. That's crazy, but kind of cool. I am putting together reading lists for especially my poetry appreciation project and some history. So like if I was teaching a course on the World Wars, World War I, World War II, and the interwar period, what would I be assigning as the assigned readings for those courses? Assuming that it's more of a graduate level course where reading several books a week is normal. I know when I was in graduate school, I was reading between 2 and 6 books usually per week. Not necessarily cover to cover, but close. And that was just kind of par for the course. So my reading lists will be designed accordingly. It does not mean I expect anybody to actually read all the books on the lists. But realistically, you may not be able to access them all. Nonfiction can be harder to find. Libraries may or may not stock all the books. Yeah. So anyway, so I was doing that for myself anyway, and then some other people, some of my friends in the community I hang out in, were interested in joining in if I get these done. So I will be making them and making them available. That should be fun. So that was kind of fun. The poetry appreciation one kind of connects into another trend in topics that I've seen. And this may be partly the algorithm talking, because I'm only seeing what it shows me. I don't know all the trends for Booktube-ish content. But there's a lot of, I wouldn't call it pushback, but partly because I don't feel pressured to read particular things by the internet. And I don't know where people are getting that pressure from. It probably has to do with what the algorithm thinks they want to see or should be seeing. But I have had a few questions, mostly privately. I haven't really had a lot of comments either way on my videos. I don't occupy the kind of space where I expect a lot of comments on my videos. But concerns about, well, if you don't like poetry, you don't need to read it. No one's forcing you. Which is a fair comment. And yeah, in general, I totally agree. If you don't want to read it, don't read it. But there's also an argument, and I've seen videos to this extent as well, generally from channels that promote reading the classics, which is interesting, about the importance of reading hard things. And reading for something besides just pure enjoyment. And that kind of goes along with what I'm doing with my poetry reading. So if you haven't followed my videos all along the last month or so, there's not a lot of videos. I'm not a prolific video maker. But I've started making myself read poetry. And I'm actually putting together a bit of a poetry appreciation course for myself that really probably starts in January. I haven't made much of a curriculum or anything yet, but I am starting now with reading poetry and trying to read a poetry book a day-ish. Some of them are quite short, so it's not that crazy. But trying to read poetry every day at the very least, which I have done today. I read about 30 pages in my contemporary Kazakh literature poetry anthology, including some I liked. So it is working a little bit. I don't know if I like them enough to reread them a lot, but poetry strikes me as something that if you like it, you read it again. You read it in different contexts and become more acquainted with it. So it's not necessarily something where you read it once and you're done and you check it off and you move on. unless you hated it, and then that works. But I like the idea that if I'm going to reject an author, a genre, a series, whatever, that I have a reason for rejecting it, which requires some knowledge with which to make that reasoned argument against it. When I was reading all of the books in the A's at my local branch library, I didn't get to just skip anything that had the inspirational sticker on the spine, even though I would have loved to. I made myself at least try a book by every author. And if I tried an author and it was terrible, then I could say I'm not reading more of this author because I read this book and it was terrible. There's one author, Cherry Adair. If you read a lot of smut, you've probably seen or read her books. First of all, I'm sure it's a nom de plume. Yeah. Second, they need an editor. They really need an editor. One that pushes back and insists on some fixing, not just one that she can push around. I have no idea how it got to be that bad. But the one I read, the writing was so bad. So maybe she's improved since then. I don't know. I don't need to know. That one was so bad. And it was not the first in a series. It was just not something I need to read. And now that I know that, I can reject reading further books by that author because I've tried one. I know it's not just me making snap judgments based on no actual evidence. I know. I read. I hated. I moved on. So with poetry, it's quite a broad thing to just reject it offhand. And I want to know, first of all, is there poetry I like? Obviously, there's some that I like. Edgar Allan Poe's The Bells. I really like that one. If you read it out loud, it takes some breath support to do so. You really get a sense of the different kinds of bells just from reading the stanzas of the poem out loud, which is cool. Is it one of the Poe poems that the experts say is not one of his good ones? Yeah, it is. But I thought it was really cool. I like it a lot better than all the rest of Edgar Allan Poe's poems. So, I'm just going to own it. That's the best of his poems. I liked it. I don't even like poetry, and I liked it. And I have reasons why I liked it. It's not just a vibes thing. And I don't know why they think it's not a great poem. Maybe they didn't read it out loud. I have no idea. There's other poems I like. There's one, Who Walks with Beauty. I don't remember the poet, but it's a fairly classic poem that's in, anthologies of poetry, which is where I found it. It's good. I had it memorized for a while even. There's poems that I like. I know I like Rainer Maria Rilke. I've read some prose by Rilke that I also liked. So that's one that just has a knack for using language beautifully. I appreciate that. So I'm making myself go through poetry and actually read it to fine-tune my understanding of poetry, appreciate what's there to be appreciated, and have an educated opinion, not just a knee-jerk reaction that I don't like poetry. That's what I'm up to, really, with the poetry. There will be a lot of grumbling. Some of the poetry has been really bad. There was one that I didn't even make my sister read it. I just sent it back where it came from because it was not good poetry. And it might be something that people would enjoy that happened to also find the poetry and greeting cards absolutely profound. It was that level of poetry. I don't know exactly what I disliked about it. That's something where the poetry appreciation course comes in. And I will be watching for books that further this education and videos. There's all sorts of self-education resources online. I work in a bookstore. The kinds of stuff I'm thinking about probably show up in formats where we're not going to be able to sell them anyway. We don't sell a lot of textbooks, so if they show up, I can adopt one. I don't know. So that's that. I just had a few questions and concerns come up from people about it and wanted to explain that a little bit better. There were a few people that were starting to talk again about numbers. This is something where every year around this time and leading into the new year, we get people that are attaching moral judgments to numbers, whether large or small numbers. So, have you read over 100 books this year? Have you read under 12 books this year? Do you read an insane number of books, and could you possibly have read them? This topic gets flogged to death and then comes right back a year later. So I'm not going to belabor the point too much, but I am going to reiterate on this channel, I introduce myself as Jamie B, and I read a ton of books. This is true. I read a ton of books. And I proudly read a ton of books. And I do defend the small statistical anomaly of Booktube. I don't know if anomaly is quite the right word, but the portion of the readership that's on Booktube that reads literally hundreds of books a year. There are not that many of us. Most people on Booktube are probably in the 50 to 150 range from what I've seen. And really, the more successful they get, the more they tend to be closer to the 50 to 100 range because it takes time to make and edit videos. And doing bookish content is a lot more than just reading books. So, most of the people that are available to compare yourself to in Booktube are not in the hundreds of books range anyway. In the romance genre subsection of Booktube, there are a few more people that read the hundreds of books, partly because romance tends to be formulaic and fast. Probably crime novels would be similar, but a lot of modern crime novels are fat. They're, 350 to 600 pages long. I'm staring at my Elizabeth George books that I haven't gotten to yet. Those are fat books. And that's not the only series I have that's in that range. Just every book is a long book, except I, Richard, which is very short. I don't remember if I read that one. But, most genre fiction in the stereotypical end of the genre, anyway, tends to be a certain length. And for romance and crime novels, a lot of them are pretty short. So you get more people that have read 300, 400, 500 books in a year. And the more you read, the faster you read. Up to a point, you can't, speed read past a certain point because your eyes can only move so fast. But you do read more and read faster. It does go together. If you are used to reading 50 books in a year, and then you're trying to read twice that, it's going to take a while to get your reading speed to where you can read twice that without changing your lifestyle. And lifestyle is the next thing that determines the people that read a lot of books. In my case, I am a disabled poor person who volunteers and otherwise has practically no income. There are reasons. Hopefully there are things that are going to change in the next year. I don't know. Well, I know some things have to change in the next year. I will have to move in probably the next 8 months. Something like that. So there are some changes that are going to happen, and hopefully along with those changes, I will have an income. Maybe less time to read. Although, we'll see. I'm curious actually to see how much my reading rate holds once I have an income and a paid position instead of what I do now. Because I'm really not reading for most of the day if I'm at my volunteer job. And I actually have 2 volunteer things that I do. And I do other things that are out of the house that I also am not reading during. So I'm still not reading all the time. I'm still just reading for parts of the day that I was reading before when I had a paid position. So anyway, but lifestyle is important. I don't have children. I also don't have a spouse. So I don't have those time commitments that keep me from reading books that I want to read when I want to read. There are some constraints in terms of my housemates and how I use the public spaces while the housemates are around. But even then, it's not really that much of a constraint. If it was, I could just sit in my room and read. So if your situation is such that you don't have, time to read more than, half an hour of how much you can fit in at night, you can't compare yourself to people that have my lifestyle where I have a lot more time to read. And then there's, vision. Obviously, I've started wearing glasses to read, plus 1.5 or 1.75. So could be worse, but I've started wearing glasses this year and grumble about them a lot. I hate having them sit on my nose, but where else are they going to sit? And in my ears, I have a headband on that at least keeps them from sitting directly on the backs of my ears, but I hate them. I do. Unfortunately, I don't think that the reason I need glasses is something where I could do a quick fix surgery and it would go away. Even if I could afford it, it's not gonna work like that. It's just a Jamie is getting old and needs glasses thing. Anyway, but if you have vision problems or text processing issues, dyslexia being one of the more obvious ones, you can't expect to be keeping up with the reading rates of people that don't have those limitations. And before I admitted that I needed glasses, I could not read the smaller print of older paperbacks, except in really good lighting. I was having issues with any NetGalley arcs that you couldn't make the font big enough. They don't all let you make the font bigger because I couldn't see them on my computer screen, and my computer screen's not that big anyway, so that was not helping. So yeah, if you have vision stuff going on or attention related stuff going on, basically in a nutshell, all of us have natural reading rates based on our lifestyles and limitations. And we all read different stuff. I'm not going to ever probably be a romance reader. I'm an asexual or close to it, and I have no interest. So I'm not going to benefit from the fast, formulaic structure of romance novels in bumping my numbers. Do I care about my numbers? Not really. Does it look like that? I don't know. My numbers, this is why this is a rant that I'm throwing out here now, and then you'll see my final numbers in a couple weeks. But I'll say this now, I don't think I'm going to hit 500. But that is an important point, because with all the poetry books, 450 is probably a good ballpark, at least. If I could actually catch up on my ARCs and audiobooks and print books goal that I was trying to do for December, then yeah, I actually would hit 500. So, yeah. So don't hate me. I read a lot of books. Basically, is this portion of this video. If you want to read more books, this is something that always comes up. People want to be able to read more books. First of all, work on your attention, because that's something I notice. If I am not actually reading with my eyeballs, I lose the ability to really focus on reading with my eyeballs, and it takes a while to get that back. So how I do it, I start with either short stories or chapters, and I will put down all the distractions, focus on the reading, the book, just the book, for a short story or a chapter, where I actually make myself just focus on the text. Not for an hour, not for a particular time of any sort, just for that many pages. If it's hard, I pick a shorter story and start with that. But if you work from that up to something longer, you can get to where you can sit for an hour and read your book. But it's not something that just happens automatically. Humans don't pop out fully formed and ready to read a book. All this training your brain to read thing, it's a trained thing. It's not totally natural. And it is a skill that you do need to practice in order to keep it going. And social media seems to maybe not help with attention. I kind of wonder, though, if we just don't teach people how to use social media in a way where it's not harmful. Because you can focus using social media for the same kind of things. If you are on Facebook and you follow people that post long-form content, you can actually focus on reading the whole thing of the long-form content before you move on to the next post. It's still focusing on reading with your eyeballs for longer than you're used to. So that's something that I do, actually. I make myself every once in a while retrain a little bit, because I do like the audiobooks. It's nice to be able to do audiobooks and crocheting at the same time. And I do a lot of NetGalley ARCs that are e-ARCs on my computer screen. So actually sitting down with a physical book isn't as common as it used to be. And I have a lot of physical books. So that would be the first thing I would say, just for anybody. Pick something with a set number of pages. You get that nice dopamine hit when you finish. So you've accomplished something, you can feel good about it. And then you do the next one. And if it was really hard, reward yourself with something small and then do it again. Focusing on stories and on characters and things like that might help. I've tried before to think about, okay, if I was grading this piece of writing, so this story, this novel, whatever it is I'm reading, how would I rate the plot, the characters, the setting? What would I be noting that needs work? So if you have questions like that while you're reading, you're not just reading it, you're answering a question. And for me anyway, having something like that you're trying to answer by reading the text, it helps me to focus on the text longer. And I get more out of it. So this is also part of how I would respond to some of the comments about people that read the hundreds of books a year not getting much out of what they read. If you are reading for a purpose, you might actually get more out of the reading. And I would say that you don't always need to remember everything you read. A lot of the books I read every year are just books that you read it for the vibes, it's fun, you move on. And a lot of authors, that's what they do. That's how they sell books. That's why people buy their books. That's the whole point. So you don't need to remember everything you read. You really don't. Ideally, you remember it long enough to write the review. And if I read a book and 5 minutes after I finish the last page, I don't remember what I read, either there's something off about me, which can be the case if it's middle of the night and I'm just too tired to finish the book. I might actually go back and read the last 30% again until it clicks what I was just reading and I can write my review. But there are books out there, among the close to 500 books I've read this year, there are some that there's really not much to be said about them unless it's criticism that, they need to work on their dialogue. They don't describe any of the settings, so there's nothing to remember because there's nothing there. And you don't need to remember those either. You can move on. Anyway, but having things that you're trying to answer, having things that you are discussing with other people helps. So buddy reads are great. I've done several. I finished The Shadow of the Wind finally this year by doing a buddy read. It was a tricky buddy read because we really had a hard time staying in communication and actually reading the book. And yeah, we tried. But I did finish it. And we did discuss it enough that I remember more of it because we discussed it. I still didn't like it as much as I wanted to. But when I read the next book in the series, there's a second book. I at least remember enough about it to read the next book. So that's part of how I remember stuff that I read, how I get stuff out of what I'm reading despite reading so many books. And I read a variety of books. I am not just reading literary fiction or crime novels or nonfiction. I'm reading anything that looks good at the time. And I have books all around me that are quite a variety of books. So that's actually one of the tricks to reading more books. And I know a lot of people talk about that. That If you are reading a variety of lengths of books and styles of books and genres of books, and I've got poetry and plays and essays and long novels and short novels, and there's a lot of variety. There's books that are classics, like classics, like translated Greek stuff and Roman stuff. There's books in translation from all over the world. Yeah, I've got a lot of different kinds of books to choose from, and I read them. I always read a few long ones every year, and I always read a few short ones every year, although I tend not to read as many short ones as a lot of people seem to. It takes real effort to actually get myself to collect and then read the short ones. But I do. And I will read more of those next year because I want to get some of them done because it's silly I haven't finished them. They're not even that long. So, yeah. If you're trying to read more books, there you go. There's some ideas from my experience that I think would help a lot of people to read more books. Join a community that reads more books. Although this is more preaching to the choir probably because a lot of my subscribers are people I know from reading sprints. We're already in a community. It's great. If you haven't tried out reading sprints yet, you should. And talk in the chat. Like, say hi. Tell people what you're reading. Just be a part of the community. Most of the reading sprints I've been involved in are really friendly. If you get into reading sprints hosted by the really big channels, I'm sure that they were great reading sprints hosts for smaller sprints, and they do a great job corralling the chaos anyway. But if you're looking for a community where you interact with people, those can be intimidating because there's so many people. Your comments are barely going to be noticed by most people, and I don't like that very much. I tend to avoid them. If I want community, I want community. If I want something that's just a Pomodoro, time structuring, and with people that I can pretend are there in the room with me so I don't feel lonely while I'm reading, that's actually kind of what those big channel reading sprints are great for. But you don't meet a lot of people because they don't talk to you because they don't know you, and yeah. But there's a lot of reading sprints hosted by small booktubers and medium booktubers that are absolutely fantastic. And try it out. You meet people, you actually interact with people. Readathons are another thing, and those tend to have things like Discord that you interact with people more than just in the YouTube channel. So if you want a community where you actually can make friends with other people around reading and books, those are excellent mechanisms to meet people. And then you can meet people within your genres. So if you do read romance, there are romance readathons and Discords connected with those. And you get involved with that, meet other people that read a ton of romances, and voila, you have a community. It's great. Because that's another trend I've been seeing is people that they've been on Booktube and they feel like they're talking into a void. People do comment on their videos. A lot of them are big booktubers and they feel lonely and disconnected from everyone, and I don't get it. But maybe it is lonely on the top. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, there's been a lot of videos coming out and being promoted by the algorithm anyway, about people that just feel disconnected, that they need people in their lives, and they're doing all this channel content creation, and They feel isolated. They don't know what they're doing it for. They feel like Booktube is pushing them to do things they don't want to do. It shouldn't be like that. They feel like content creators like myself that read a ton of books are like a judgment on them if they don't also read a ton of books, which I hope is not the case for any of my subscribers. If in all of this rant you feel like I'm attacking you for only reading 12 books a year, don't. Yeah. I am quite happy to read close to 500 books a year and tell you what I think about the books. And then you know more about the books. And if you only have time to read 12 books a year, you have a bit more of an informed set of data to base your decisions on about which 12 books you're going to pick up. Because, if you don't read a lot of books, it's a huge investment picking which books you're going to read. I totally get that. And I have the kind of brain and the kind of lifestyle that I can read hundreds of books. And I enjoy it, so I might as well. It's my public service. But I don't expect anybody else to. There are literally a handful of booktubers that I've encountered anywhere on Booktube that read as much as I do. And literally only a handful. I think I'm still near the top of the range. I know that Eric Carl Anderson did a video at one point about how he reads so much and his lifestyle is structured around reading and all this stuff. I'm not sure if his numbers are on par with mine or if mine are getting a little bit higher at this point. So, I pay attention to these things. I don't really care, and I'm not going for numbers. Maybe that's an aside I should throw into this video. I keep track of my numbers on Goodreads because it counts them, not because I care. I do a annual goal just for the hell of it. But if I get to July and I'm not anywhere close to my goal, I drop the goal. I cut it back a little bit. So it used to be I did 365 as my automatic goal before I joined Booktube. And I would just cut it back to 300 if I got to July and realized I was way behind and was never going to hit it. I would just adjust it so that I would be able to reach the goal. Because I don't know in January what's going to happen that year. So that's how much I don't care about the numbers. I like to have a goal to be working towards, but it doesn't have to be any particular number. It's just a goal for myself so that I have something to strive towards. My number this year had to go up to 450 because I was not... was it even 450? I think it was 400. I'll have to look now. I think I might have to change it to 450. I think that's where the 450 comes from. But I had to bump it up because it was too easy. Because with Booktube, all this peer pressure and focusing on books and all this stuff, readathons, competitive readathons, oh my goodness. These things, if they existed when I was younger, I would have been very happy. But with all this extra influence, my numbers are through the roof compared to what I'm used to. In July, I was already to a point where 365 would have been way too easy. So that's the numbers thing. But it's not like I just, decided I was going to hit 500 this year. I read what I read, log them in Goodreads, and it spits out a number. And that's what I've read. And I've been doing a little bit more rereading. Rereading is faster because I already read it once. So if you take those out, And I'm still on the fence about whether they should count towards my numbers or not. But I did read them still, cover to cover, again. They just go faster because I know the story already. But I'm still way over my numbers, even taking out the rereads. So there's that. And there's always those books that you're not totally happy with how much you retained. And that, I think that's the other topic that I was going to throw into this rant, and we'll go ahead and throw it in. So there have been books this year that I count them as finished because I did finish them, but I still have them, and I might revisit them and read them again later. So far in the last month, I finished The Children's Bible by Lydia Millet, that I read, I think in June for TAR, but for one of those readathons. And I read it, but I didn't really get much out of it. I didn't see the point of why it would be something anyone would nominate for an award, which it was. And so I read it again. And this time I liked it. It was not amazing. The issues that had me dragging through it the first time were still there. But I knew about those already and could see past them enough to get into the second half of the book where it starts to pick up, and then it's okay. Still had issues. Still was not a solid 5-star. But there's actually like essays and books about how to read books where they talk about reading a book is not necessarily just reading it once and you're done. Really reading a book, you read it the first time and you get your plot, you get your basic structure and your basic themes, and then you read it the second time and you get details and all this kind of stuff. For those rather pedantic academics, reading does mean rereading, not just reading it once. And I took that to heart. I was reading things like that when I was in elementary and middle school because I was that kind of kid. So, when I have books that I don't process as well as I think I should have, if it's something where it's been nominated for awards and I thought it was crap, I'm like, I missed something here. I need to read this again. Or just something where it was a lot more involved than I had the brain space for at the time, and maybe I missed stuff. So I keep those around and I reread them, and I generally don't count them twice in the same year unless I really did focus on reading them more than once in 1 year, and then I don't really care. I'll go by how I feel at the time about how much it counts as reading a book again. Numbers, they're annoying. So I've got a few books that I've not gotten rid of this year. If you haven't followed me for very long, that part may still not be totally making sense. And it connects in with the last of the rant topics that came up from watching State of the Booktube. I almost forgot about it. But they all do connect. And so we're there. So there are booktubers whose whole point of their channel is to read all the books they own that they haven't read yet, because it makes them very uncomfortable to own books that they have not read. And to me, that's just bonkers. I get it from an intellectual perspective. I totally understand why they feel they need to do that. But I think it kind of comes down to how you grow up with your relationship with books and books at home, and the role of the home library. stuff like that. And then how poor you are or how financially comfortable you are. If you are financially comfortable enough that you are buying your books where retail is an option, like not buying them at the bargain bin end of the used bookstore, like you can actually spend money on books, then yeah, if it stresses you out to own books you haven't read, then yeah, you only own a few books. You read them, you get some more books, you read them, and then you're not stressed, and it's great. If you grew up like our family did, where you have many shelves of books that they live in the house with you, and you can read them because they're there, and you haven't read most of them, that's kind of the point. When you get to where you don't want to reread it anymore, you get rid of it and get more books. I grew up with the abundance of books at home model where we didn't acquire the books with the expectation that we were going to read them right then. We acquired the books so that we could read them whenever. Otherwise, they're library books and they have a deadline, and then you do have to read them or return them by the deadline. So for me, the concept that you acquire books and then get rid of them without reading them just because you haven't read them, why would you do that to yourself? I mean, if you got the book and then you realize that you couldn't stand that author, then yeah, you get rid of that book. But just as a hot potato kind of thing, like you've held on to it for a year and didn't read it, so now you have to get rid of it. For me, that's just insane. And part of that for me as an adult is that I'm also very poor. I have a nice setting behind me, and I probably don't come across as poor as I am sometimes. But every resource that can allow me to seem less poor is precarious at best. And at least for now, I actually don't really have an income. So there is no income with which to buy books. I still manage to acquire books, and part of my choosing to do this channel, and I think I talked about this in my early videos, early being last year, that I decided that my being poor was not an excuse to not do videos, that it was actually important for people who are poor to be visible in the Booktube spaces, because it is possible to be a reader without having enough money to be able to afford books at normal bookstores. That there are other ways to be a reader. And I acquire a lot of books. I volunteer at a Friends of the Library bookstore, actually, and I get free books working there. Some that I get kind of like getting paid, but in books, and some that are just books that we can't sell, and so we can adopt them, and so I do. And I do get a little bit of money here and there, so I save it up, and then I can buy bags of books in addition, and I have lots of books. But I acquire them in ways that I can't just go and acquire them whenever I feel like it. Those opportunities are there, and you either take them or you miss out on those books. So I take the books when I get the books, and then I have the books when I want to read the books. And it's great. And I use my library a lot. So for me, I have primarily books that I have not read. The way that works is when I finish a book, if I don't plan to reread the book, it goes away. It either goes back to the bookstore or to a little free library, or it goes to a sibling, or it goes to a friend, but it goes away. So that I don't actually have a large number of books that I've already read in my possession. As a matter of fact, the total number of books that I've read that I own would fit in like the top 2 sections of the bookshelf behind me. The rest of my books are books I've not read yet. And that's by design. I don't feel stressed about it. The concept of feeling guilt for having all these books and I haven't read them yet is foreign to me. I can understand it intellectually because I've watched a lot of Booktube. But I feel content with the fact that I have so many books. It's wonderful. I have an abundance of books to choose from. And if I suddenly don't have access to acquire more books for a while, which in the next 8 months I have to move, and I can't bring my bookstore with me, it's not mine. So I don't know what my access to books will be where I go next. I know I'll find books. I do, anyway. But it may be a lot more constrained. And at that time, I still have hundreds, maybe thousands. I need to count them. That may be a video for 2026, counting the books. But I have a lot of books that will tide me over until I get stable again with a new source for my books. And that is great. I love it. And I have so many books to choose from that if I join a readathon, I can comb through my own collection to find the books that I'm going to read for the readathon, which I do. It's why there's such chaos, because every time I join a readathon, I make stacks of books from my collection for the readathon, and I read maybe a third of them, and then they're all jumbled again. So, anyway. Is that enough book rant for one ranty video that probably no one's going to watch anyway? I don't know. I'm always surprised that I have viewers that actually watch me talking about books, but yeah. Even if it's just me watching it in a year to see how my opinions have changed. It was fun. And I'm not much of a drinker. I still have like 2/3 of my whiskey. Didn't down it all yet. So I'm going to go back to my book. I am still reading poetry. This one. And I will probably finish my arc. I'll tell you a little bit about my arc, and then I will call this good. I've been reading Living in the Third Reich by Dr. Patrick Labriola. This is an arc. I think it came out in July. Pretty sure it came out in July. It's nonfiction. I've read a few books like it lately, including one that was in print from the history section that I run at the bookstore, where they interview Germans about their time under Hitler, during the Third Reich, during the war. And then they compile them into a book. So this is another one of those, but I like its organization because it's organized kind of by time period. So we have before the war starts, before World War II starts, during World War II, and organized by the beginning of the war, middle of the war, the Russians engaging with the Germans in the war, and getting into Germany and exchanging fire in Germany, which obviously from some of these stories alarmed a lot of people that they didn't think the Russians could make it that far into Germany. So that they didn't flee when they could have, because they didn't think it was going to happen. And then right now I'm in the section where it's the Americans have arrived in Germany. So I like the organization. So it's like a history of World War II from all these different perspectives of people that were there They're not officers, they're not soldiers, they're just civilians. A lot of them were children during these parts of this period of history. Not all of them German. Some of them are Czech, Polish. There's some Jewish people, but it's not a Jews versus non-Jews structure. I've read those too. This one's really looking at the experience of just the civilians on the ground as all this is happening. I'm really enjoying it. And each story could be its own novel. It's great. So if you haven't seen it yet, keep an eye out for it. Living in the Third Reich by Labriola. And the memoir autobiography that I read earlier this month, I think it was this month still, by Eva Richter. The last name is definitely Richter. That one actually is a very similar story to one of the ones that's in here, where their family traveled from Germany to China to escape persecution because they were Jewish. So there's been some really good stories if you're interested in World War II from different perspectives. And I will be including both of them as recommended reading for my reading list that I'm putting together for World War II. So anyway, I will stop talking your ear off so that I can finish my whiskey, read some more poetry, and I'll make probably more of my typical videos next. So it'll probably be week 2-ish, maybe week 2-ish. Probably it'll be December 15 by the time I make it, because I think that's going to be the next day that I'll actually be filming. The next 2 days are going to be insane. I'll tell you more about it afterwards, because it's a story in and of itself. But yeah, so I will see you guys in the next video or on sprints. Probably not until the 14th, because the next 2 days are going to be insane. Till then, hopefully you guys are reading good books. And let me know your thoughts on the various things that I've ranted about in this video. I will be policing the comments, so be nice to myself and to everybody else that may or may not actually read comments and comment on videos like this. But I still don't expect anyone to get to this point. If you have, that's amazing. Oh my goodness. But yes, be nice. Try and keep in mind that there are a lot of perspectives in Booktube. Mine being one that maybe you don't hear as much of just because I'm poor and I collect books I don't read. Oh my goodness. That sounds so bad like that. I do read them. I read every book I own eventually before it goes away. I almost never send them away unread. Anyway, I'll let you guys go. Happy reading, everyone. I will see you next time. Bye.